Hello and welcome to this weekly scheduled Naturehood live stream event, which I must let you into the secret isn't actually live this week, but never mind, perhaps the future. My name's Rob, and today I'm going to be speaking about forest gardens and forest gardening. So I've got a small forest garden here to show you. It's been planted over the last 3 to 16 months, so it's very young. But I think you'll be able to pick up the principles and the ideas behind forest gardening, and also to learn about the benefits to wildlife and to nature through this type of growing. So, forest garden is very poorly named. It doesn't really tell you much about what it is. The idea of a forest garden is that we should mimic nature, try and recreate something which is a beautiful thing, something with aesthetic value, something which is beneficial to nature, but also productive for people. So it's food producing, it might be producing other materials as well. I've got this little picture here, which hopefully the camera can pick up. I'm going to hold up, so if you want to watch the video again and pause, there are some ideas of what a forest garden might provide you. So poles, basket making equipment, materials, ties, salad leaves, spices. Plants can provide us with all sorts of things, certainly all of those things, and many of the modern day plastics and dyes that we use, they're inspired by nature anyway. So here's the forest garden, and let's have a think about the principles that underlie it. So when developing something like this, the first thing we think about and the first things that we plant on the site are the taller trees. So we're looking at getting layers in here. So the tallest trees provide the canopy, and beneath that we'd have a sub-canopy. So this garden, it hasn't got a canopy because it's a back garden. So we're not going to plant walnut trees or anything really huge in there, and it's effectively its canopy, its sub-canopy is based around fruit trees, apple trees at the moment. But then beneath that, there's going to be some shrubby plants. So the next layer down is shrubby plants. So we've got an elder in here, and beneath that we've got some bushes. We've got jostaberries, red currants, gooseberries. So all of this creates different layers in the forest garden. And then as you get lower down to the ground, you've got room for your vegetable crops and things like rhubarb. You have herbs growing, and on the floor itself, there's room for plants which will provide crops for us, such as strawberries. So there's lots of strawberries in this garden. They're spread everywhere. Beyond that, there's other layers which you can consider them as layers to your forest garden. Some people have a pond, so you have an aquatic layer. You can produce things from that, or you can use vertical space as well. So this garden's got a little bit of vertical growth. I even put in a runner bean this year. So the idea here with a forest garden is that we don't grow annual crops, we grow perennial crops. And we're mimicking something like a native woodland. Got another picture to show you here, that's I'm on my phone, if I can find it. So this shows a grading from the sort of natural, I can't hold it still, like a natural woodland on one side with a forest garden represented next to it, and then it goes down to arable land. So what we're trying to avoid here with forest gardening, we're trying to avoid regular inputs of energy and labour to keep the ground cleared. We're trying to avoid the destruction of the soil. We're looking at building up the soil, not destroying it. We're trying to avoid runoff. We're trying to avoid excessive water needs. So it's very it's got a big environmental remit, this kind of gardening. Right. What else do you need to say about forest gardens? They're layered. They're mimicking nature. They use all the native plants that are available. Much of the British native species are not so useful to people, so sometimes we incorporate foreign varieties. For example, apples and pears. Apples and pears are non-natives, brought in by the Romans a couple of thousand years ago. So many of the crops we are familiar with are not natives. They certainly add value for nature, but they're not native crops. I think it's time to go for a walk. Right, first stop here. Just have a look at some herbs growing. Probably most people have seen herbs growing. We've got some still flowering here. We've got some of this winter savoury, so it's only tiny little flowers, quite inconspicuous. Bit of thyme next to it. I use that quite regularly. I do like a bit of herbs in food. So these, bear in mind, these have only been in the ground for up to 16 months. So they're establishing. They're very new. Got some chives in the back here that are being grown from seed. I hope I'm pointing the camera at. Some more chives over there. I like to include things that are just present on the site anyway. So this plant in the back here, this is fat hen, which I haven't planted, but I've just allowed to grow because that can produce a crop. It's a bit like spinach to eat. It makes an edible seed as well, so there's plenty to eat. Down here is a little unusual one. This plant here is a type of plantain. So you can eat the tops of plantains, the flowering heads, and they taste a little bit like a mushroom, a bit like a nutty mushroom, I would say. The leaves got an interesting shape. This is called buckshorn plantain. It's not a native. I'm not sure where it's native to, but all of our plantains in this country are edible. I particularly favour the flower heads. I think they're really good. So moving on, we've got in this area, we're not going to stop and look at everything. There's too many plants to see. So over here, I've got a small collection of sedums, and I didn't actually put a lot of thought into these. I just thought they looked nice, and I have tried eating sedum, so I thought I'd stick a few in. So I've got 3 sedums in here. This is the one that everyone eats. This is the popular forest garden sedum, probably the most common and most well recognised one as well, Orpine. And this has got quite a fleshy leaf to it, but you can eat this leaf and it tastes a little bit like cucumber. So I would recommend that one. It's quite a nice vegetable. Well, obviously I'd recommend it. That's why it's in my garden. So moving on from there, go into this little corner. Hopefully if I angle this correctly, you can see that I've got some apples growing here. Now these apples are, they're called Blenheim Orange. I grafted this tree about 5 or 6 years ago, brought it to this garden, and I thought it would fit into the setting, so I thought it would be quite a nice choice. I like the apple. I like the history around the apple. It was actually from Blenheim Palace in Woodstock in Oxfordshire. It's from the 18th century, and it's a decent cooking apple or eating apple, so dual purpose apple. I can't remember which rootstock I grafted it on, but I know it won't be something huge, so I know this tree isn't going to get too large for the garden. Now over here, I think I've put the camera in the right place. This is it's actually pear rootstock, so it's not pear, but it's quince. So I'm growing this by laying the actual young trees on their side, and you get these shoots developing, and these shoots will root. Now we can cut these out and we can grow new trees. So we'd only be able to graft pear onto this. We can't grow apple on this. But on the other side of the garden, we've got some apple rootstock, so we can grow some apples as well. I've also got a William Crump in this garden, which is a Worcestershire variety, and since we're near to Worcestershire and Birmingham used to be part of Worcestershire, it's quite an appropriate thing to have here. That's a bit of a younger tree, a younger variety of tree from the early 20th century. Right, let's move on to the next part of the garden, which isn't very far away. This is a controversial plant, that's why we're looking at this one. So this here, I've imported this to the garden. Many people think of it as a weed. This is ground elder, and I love it. I think it's really good. I think it looks quite nice actually, but I like to eat it, especially when the leaves are this sort of size. So it's a really good herb, it's a really good vegetable. It used to be, it's recorded as having been grown around monasteries dating back thousands of years. And again, I think this one was introduced by the Romans a couple of thousand years ago. It was known by monks as gout weed, so I'm not sure if they thought it gave them gout. I don't think so, but they were quite keen on gout. Some of those monks with their rich diet. It's actually a very nutritious plant. Many wild vegetables are nutritious, so that's one I've introduced. I hope I won't regret it. But I've excluded nettles, I've excluded blackberries, and I've excluded hogweed from this garden because they are a little bit too invasive. And of course, nettles and blackberries can hurt you. Right, let's have a look over here. It's just a bit of a quick tour around, really, looking at some different plants and why they're in the garden, and thinking about how they actually add quite a lot of value to the natural environment we've got, really. So this one, it looks like a thistle, and it is a type of thistle. Haven't eaten this yet. It's a very new plant to the garden. I've only got this one specimen, and it's called a cabbage thistle. I believe you can eat the leaves like cabbage. It's not very prickly, but it's got quite a nice look to it. I like the plant. It's actually grown so vigorously, it's shaded out the American land cress that I'd originally planned to grow here. So that's waiting to be harvested under there, but it seems to be quite tolerant. Over in this corner, we've got, hopefully everyone's guessing, this one's a type of mint, but it's a type of spearmint. This is chocolate spearmint. It does have a little bit of a hint of chocolate. I think sometimes you can't smell it as much. It seems to be dying off, that smell now. But it's a nice one, that is, to make a drink with. Over here, we have got just common everyday mint. It grows very prolifically. I had a little debate with myself about whether to allow that to just grow and go for it, or whether I should put it in a container to restrict its roots. And in the end, the lazy option won. Just notice down here, I don't know if you can see it, but this is a wild type of cress. This is hairy bitter cress. So again, some of the plants that colonise your garden anyway, they're quite useful in the forest garden. If they're just in there doing their own thing, you can harvest them when you feel like it. So there's plenty of things you can just leave in or you already have available in the garden. Right, moving on. We'll come back to this bit. I've just picked some of my favourite spots to look at, really, because we haven't got very long. So this little area here, it looks very green. There's some plants that people might recognise, and it demonstrates how diverse the edible plants are, really. It shows quite a lot of different things growing here. So to start with, up here, higher up in the shrubby, sort of bushy type of layer, really, we've got this British native plant, elder. So it's an edible, well, it's not a highly edible plant, but the ripe berries are edible, and they can be used for all sorts of baking, drinks making. You can eat the flowers as well, so that's why I have that one in the garden. Also, it's a great habitat as well, and the bees love it when it's in flower. The bees love it, so it's a good nature plant. Down here again, we've got this native, I believe it might be naturalised. I think it's a native. Looks very much like our toxic, harmful hemlock, but this is a plant I would not recommend picking in the wild because it looks very much like hemlock. It's not hemlock. It's actually sweet cicely. You can tell it's sweet cicely when you smell it because it smells sweet. It smells a bit like aniseed. So this is something you can use to sweeten foods such as rhubarb. It's growing next to the rhubarb, and there's a few strawberries in there as well. And got some, probably not in the camera shot, is it? Here it is, a bit of rosemary. So there's all sorts of things growing close to each other. And there's a few wild things in here I can just see on the ground, probably not on the video very well, but we've got some oxalis in there. And we've got a little bit of nigella that's made its way in. So the aim is really that when I'm weeding in here, I'll take out plants I don't like, obviously, and sometimes find things I'm glad decide to turn up and show their faces. This area could do with a bit of a mulch. You might be able to see that there isn't much wood chip there, whereas the rest of the garden is covered in wood chip, a nice thick layer. The reason we have this thick layer is to mimic the wild woodland environment. Keep the water in and keep the weeds down. Right. Excuse me. So this shot really just shows how much I like rhubarb. Got quite a few different varieties of rhubarb growing in here, and I'm looking forward to getting a crop for the first time next year. So I think it's true to say actually very little has been harvested from this garden yet. It's only young. It's been created since last year. So at the moment the trees and the bushes and all the plants are establishing, and I'm just looking forward to getting crops out of them. So that just about rounds this video up. Sorry, I'm messing with the camera. If you would like to get involved with Naturehood, which we certainly hope you would, you can sign up at my.naturehood.uk, and we look forward to seeing you again on these live streams next Wednesday and every Wednesday for now at 12 o'clock. Thank you very much.